Today I'm going to demonstrate an alternative long-tailed tubular cast on. This is the cast on that I referred to in my Ulan pattern, which is this one there. So this cast on is great for creating a nice stretchy elastic edge on 1x1 ribbing. Now, as it's a long-tailed cast on, we need to start with 3 times the circumference of what we're planning to knit. So we'll just get our tail there. 1 straight needle to cast on with, and this just begins with a simple slip knot. Tail begins in our left hand, working yarn in our right hand, and this is a really simple repetitive movement. This yarn goes under and over. If you hold the slip knot with your finger, it makes it much easier. This yarn under and over, and then this one down beside and back onto its starting position. Then we just mirror the movement working from the opposite side. This yarn goes under and over, this yarn under and over, and this one down beside and back to its start. I'll just repeat those 2 movements again. Under and over, down the side and back to the start. And then from the opposite direction, under and over, down the side to the start. You can see we're getting our stitches formed along the edge there. The really wonderful thing about this cast on is that I find it really easy to know where I'm up to, so that if I've stopped and got distracted by a child or something, I can look for the little knob at the side, and I know that's the side that needs to go under next. Under and over, under and over. Some people find it easy to hold the needle between their legs, gives them a bit more stability. You might find that helps when you're working this one. Okay, we might just fast forward it until I cast on a few more stitches to get to the end of how many we need to cast on. Oops. So I've continued to cast on until I have 1 less stitch than I need. I count the slip knot as one of my stitches, so for the last stitch, instead of going under and over, I just bring this yarn, the working yarn, which is what you'll be up to if you've got an even number to cast on, over, and I just tie a really loose little knot there. Okay. Now we're going to work our setup rows. To work our setup rows, we're just going to turn it around. Got all our little stitches lined up on our needle straight. With this tubular cast on, you can work straight onto a circular needle, or you can stick with the straight. There's a slightly different way for each of those. I'm going to show you onto the circular because that's what I'll be using it for. So I've got my circular, making sure that I'm knitting to the working yarn. I'm going to knit through the back of the loop of the first stitch. So just knit through the back of the loop, bring the yarn to the front, slip the next stitch purlwise, yarn to the back, knit through the back of the loop, yarn to the front, slip purlwise, yarn to the back, knit through the back of the loop. And you guessed it, we're going to keep doing that till we get right to the end. So again, we might just fasten up this little pace for this one a bit. So I finished transferring all my stitches from my straight needle to my circular needle. My last stitch that I transferred was the slip knot. So I treat that as a purl stitch, as that's what's in my ribbing pattern. Slip it purlwise and just bring the yarn to the front. Now there are 2 ways I can work my setup row. I can turn my needles and I can work them flat again, and I simply go through the same process as I worked before, but this time knitting into the front of the stitch, without splitting it. It's always a good thing. Bring the yarn to the front, slip it purlwise, and knitting to the front of the stitch. So I can do that, and maybe you want to give that a crack for your first time just to make sure you're all okay with it. Or what you can do is, if you want to start knitting circularly, I can simply make sure all my stitches aren't twisted, and you'll notice with a tubular cast on, it's really easy to check your stitches, far more easier, particularly if you've got a really long cast on than it is, say, with a long tail cast on. Okay, so all I do is I notice that my next stitch up is a knit stitch. For in the round, I'm going to work the opposite as if I would work the setup rounds flat. So I'm going to slip the yarn to the back, and I'm going to slip that first knit stitch purlwise, bring the yarn to the front, purl the next stitch, yarn to the back, slip that knit stitch, yarn to the front, purl, yarn to the back, slip the next stitch, purl the purl stitch, yarn to the back, slip the next stitch, purl the purl stitch, yarn to the back. I can already seeing that little edge forming. I love tubular edges, they're so neat and professional. They just look great. It's like you've got that beautiful finish that you get on a store-bought jumper or socks or whatever, and you can apply it to your own, and it's really not that hard. I think knitters get a bit freaked out that it must be really hard, but it's not, and this way is really terrific. So again, I'm just going to fast forward to get to the end of the row so that you can see what I'm doing here. I've worked my way around to the end of the second setup row. My last stitch was a purl stitch, and now I'm going to put my marker in. I probably should have done it for the last row, but we'll pop it in now, and I just continue on in pattern as the pattern asked me to, which is knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So as per the rest of the pattern, and I'm going to have this really lovely edge on my knitting that's elastic and stretchy and really professional looking. And I really think that this way of working a tubular cast on is not that difficult. What I also like about this one, as opposed to the normal long tail tubular cast on, is that my first stitch in my round is a knit stitch, not a purl stitch. And there's just, I don't know, there's a nicer synchronicity about that for me. So that is a alternative long tail tubular cast on, and have a crack and enjoy.